Hi, I'm Brittany and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be painting these different Christmas elements, and in the next video we'll learn how to put them together in a Christmas painting. Today I'm using my Arches cold pressed watercolor paper and my Princeton Heritage round brushes. This is a size 6 and a size 3, and I might want to keep my size 10 handy just in case I need to reach for that. The first thing I want to paint is a pine cone, so I'm taking this brown color, burnt umber, and I'm taking my size 6 and just pressing the tip of my brush down to make these top parts of the pine cone. Now I want to take my brush and turn it horizontally and continue making these brush strokes with the tip of the brush, and I'm making about 3 or 4 across until I have the shape of the pine cone that I want. And I think that shape looks pretty good, so I'm going to stop here. Now I'm just taking some darker burnt umber and dropping it into that wet paint. Then I'm just going to let that dry, and I'll come back to it later with a darker final layer. Next I want to paint a pine tree branch, so I'm just taking my burnt umber again and I'm painting these squiggly lines to create some branches. Now I'll take my sap green color and paint in the pine needles. To do this, I just take the very tip of my brush and I flick it from the branch outwards. Just keep painting these needles until it's to your desired fullness. I also like to paint a couple little rogue pine needles at the top of the branch here, just so it looks like another branch is trying to grow in. Next, I'm going to take my darker Perylene Green and just go over the top of those sap green pine needles to make them look fuller. Now I'm going back in with a darker burnt umber, and at the bottom of this branch I'm just kind of tracing it and making it look like it's got some shadows. Since my pine cone has dried, now I can go in with a really deep mixture of burnt umber and Payne's gray and just dab my brush around to add more shadows. Now I want to paint some red berries, so I'm taking just Winsor Red Deep and I'm painting a little circle. Then I'm going to rinse off my brush, and in a lighter shade I'm going to paint another one right next to it. For the third berry I rinsed off my brush almost completely and I'm painting a really light shade. Again, I'll take just the red on my brush and create the first berry. For the second one I just have water on my brush, but I'm going to touch it up against that first berry that I painted. And just keep repeating that process until you have the desired numbers of berries that you want. Now to connect the berries, I'm just taking my really skinny little brush and I've got burnt umber and I'm just connecting them with these little sticks. I want to add some blue leaves, so I'm just taking this pretty blue-green color and I'm painting these teardrop shapes to create the leaves, and then we'll connect them together with some stems and branches. Again, I'll take my little brush, and with the tip I will paint in the stems and branches, and I'll let the burnt umber bleed into the blue-green color where it's still wet. Alright, now I want to paint another pine tree branch, only this time I'm going to paint longer pine needles, and I'm going to do it in a more bluish color. Next I want to paint some holly, so I'm taking my Winsor Red Deep to paint the 3 berries. I'll paint this one in a dark red. I'll rinse off my brush for the second berry and do it in a lighter red, and then rinse it off one more time for my 3rd berry to make sure that last one is super light. Now I'll use Sap Green, and with the tip of my brush I'll outline the shape of these holly leaves. Then I'll just fill them in quickly with this Sap Green mixture. Now this next step I want to hurry and grab my darker Perylene Green, and before my Sap Green dries, I want to drop this in around the outline of the leaf. Then I'll just repeat those same steps for this leaf on the other side. For the next set of leaves, I am taking my yellow ochre, and I'm just making these little filler leaves that we'll be able to use in our Christmas paintings. I'm just using the tip of this little brush to paint these little leaves all over these branches that I made. Next I want to take a deep dark blue, which is a mixture of my Perylene Green and Payne's Gray, and paint those same filler leaves in this color. I thought it would be fun to try and paint some ivy leaves and add it to this painting. So I'm just starting by outlining the leaves in my sap green color, and you want to make it in a star type shape. There's 5 points to it, and then once I have it outlined, I'm just going to fill it all in. And just like we did with the holly leaves, we're going to outline this leaf with a darker color while it's still wet. I'll repeat that process and paint a few more of these ivy leaves with some different shades of green. Since ivy grows on a vine, I'll go ahead and paint that in now, and then just connect these leaves to the vine. Now I'll go back to my holly leaves and I'll paint a little line down the center of each of them. And I'll go ahead and paint in the veins on these ivy leaves as well. I'm going to add a little more detail to these berries, so I'm just taking my tiniest brush and I'm painting those little tips of the berries. I don't know what they're called, but they're little and they're cute and fuzzy. And now I'm going to take a darker shade of this blue-green, and on each of these leaves I'm just going to paint half of the leaf a darker color. It's always nice to have some bigger filler leaves, and so I'm just going to take my sap green and paint my 2-stroke leaves. You just push your brush down for one side and lift up, and then push it down and lift up and connect them at the tip. For this next winter element, I'm going to paint a eucalyptus branch. So I just have a light blue-green on my brush, and I'm painting these little circular leaves right next to each other. And below that, I'll paint the same type of leaves, only in a bigger size. For the next leaf, I'm just going to paint one leaf and make it look like it's going across the stem. Now I'll just take a darker mixture of that blue-green color and dab it into this wet paint where the leaves are going to meet the stem. And I'll just keep repeating that process until this branch is as tall as I want it to be. With a mixture of that darker blue-green, I'll go ahead and paint in the stem now. Alright, so for the last Christmas element, I'm going to paint a red rose. It seems like we don't have enough red in this, so I'm just taking the tip of my brush and I'm creating those little C strokes around each other for the middle. And then I'm going to rinse off my brush. And for the next layer, I'm just pressing my brush down and creating some thicker C strokes around those center strokes. Just keep painting these outer petals in a lighter color until you have the desired fullness of the rose that you want. Before the paint dries, grab a darker red and drop it into the wet paint on those petals that you just painted. And the last thing to do is just paint some dark green leaves up against this rose. And that's all there is to it. Now you have all these different Christmas elements that you know how to paint, and in the next video we're going to put them together to create a Christmas painting. Thanks so much for watching and have a Merry Christmas.